If you don't know where to start with the implementation of these 93 controls from Annex A of ISO 27001 and what are the options for their implementation, this is the video for you. So I'll explain, what is the process of doing this, what are the options of implementing technology, processes, how to structure documentation. And I'll also show you how to use ISO 27001 software to organize this implementation of Annex A controls. And after watching this video, you'll be able to implement all these controls much more quickly and have less problems at the certification audit. And I made the video especially for project managers for this kind of ISO 27000 project, and also for security officers that are part of this whole effort. And if you want to learn more about ISO 27001, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking this button below. Now, these 93 controls from Annex A are organized in 4 sections in the Annex A. So these are the organizational controls, people controls, physical controls, and technological controls. Now, there is a separate video that I have posted on YouTube that explains these 4 sections. But from implementation point of view, is actually misleading to use these 4 sections as a kind of a guideline, because you can't really go and in one phase implement only technological controls, in other phase implement only organizational controls. Is not going to work. So I'll show you now the process of figuring out what are the best implementation steps. So since these 93 controls are not mandatory, you actually have to select which of them you will apply, which of them you will implement, and which of them not. And this is done through the following process. First, you have to identify the requirements, security requirements of your clients, partners, and also of laws and regulations. So let's say that your important client has a requirement to use a specific type of encryption when developing, let's say, an application or when using a VPN and so on. This kind of requirement you have to record, because you will have to comply with it later on once you start writing your documents and implement your security controls. The second step is to do so-called risk assessment and treatment. This is where you actually have to assess all the risks related to your company, and then define which kind of controls you have to implement. So let's say that you have the risks of specific risks of data loss, and you can then define that you want to implement a backup control to decrease these risks. And then the next step comes this statement of applicability. This is basically a document where you list all the controls from the Annex A. For each of these controls, you define which control is applicable or not. So this is actually where you make these decisions. Now, you make these decisions based on the previous 2 steps, if there is a requirement from an interested party, and if there is a requirement from your risk assessment and treatment. So after you write the statement of applicability, you will know exactly which controls you will need and which controls you will not need. And then you will also need to write after that this risk treatment plan, where you actually describe for each of these controls how you will implement them, meaning who will be in charge, what deadlines do you have, which kind of resources you need, and so on. And by the way, you can take a look at my other video which explains the statement of applicability in more detail, and also the risk treatment plan. The best practice is to define the implementation method for each control in the statement of applicability. And usually it comes down to, or the most common ways to implement the controls are by writing documents like policies and procedures, or by specifying which kind of technology you will be using. So for example, for a control related to malware, you can define that you will use a specific type of antivirus software, and basically this is it. You don't have to explain anything further. Whereas for a more complex control related to, let's say, your resiliency of your ICT systems, you can define that you will write a disaster recovery plan, which is a detailed plan which specifies how you recover your IT systems after some kind of a disaster or a disruption. So as you can see, you can balance between these two depending on the complexity. The more the complex a control is, you actually will go towards writing documents which will describe all the processes related to it, or if the control is simpler, then simply specify a certain technology that you will be using. Now, once you start writing documents, it's better if these documents actually cover certain groups of controls that are connected in some way. So you might have documents related to access controls. There are several controls from the section organizational A5 sections, and also some controls related to access control from the A8, which is the technological controls. You might then have a group of controls related to production security. You might have secure software development, physical security, human resources controls. So anyway, the actually way to do it is to find groups of controls which really make sense. And you also have to take into account the size of your company, because the larger the company, the more documents you will have. Of course, for smaller companies, you will have a very small number of documents. So for example, a larger company might have access control policy, which will cover generally all the controls related to access control, and then it will have procedures which will specify certain details on how this access control policy will be implemented. So for, let's say, authentication procedure, password management procedure, these kind of things. Whereas for a smaller company, you might have only access control policy without these additional procedures, not to create too much overhead for the employees in such a smaller company. Okay, I'll show you now an example of how to organize the implementation of controls using Conformio ISO 27001 software. Okay, once you log into Conformio, you see all the implementation steps for ISO 27001. So let's directly go to Statement of Applicability. And when you open this register, you will actually see all the controls with the suggested implementation methods. So as you can see, in some cases there is some kind of a description if the control is more simplistic, or if a control is more complex, then you actually see a couple of suggestions on how to write, the reference to actually a specific document or documents which describe this control. As you can see, since this software is intended for smaller companies, it actually groups controls and covers several controls with one document. As you can see, information classification policy covers 2 controls, access control policy covers this control, but also this control as well. Supplier security policy covers several controls here, and so on. Now, once you click any of these policies, so let's say classification policy, it will open up in a new tab, and here you will see a document wizard which helps you fill out, so the template is already there, and here you have the wizard which helps you fill out all the details of a particular document. Okay, I hope this was helpful, and to open a free trial account at Conformio, you can click this link here, and then you can start discovering yourself how to organize the work through risk register, statement of applicability, risk treatment plan, and all the other necessary steps that you have to take as part of this implementation.